So welcome, Roger, to our first Cars and Coffee at Charge Cars here. I was kind of thinking, I've got my notes in front of me, I was going to call it, is it Pony Espresso, or is it like horse trading, or what can we call it to do with the Mustang? But I think...
horsing around?
Yeah, maybe.
Horsing around, yeah.
Cars and Coffee sounds good, but welcome anyway. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff, I know, and I've got my little crib sheet. So first thing then, tell us about the journey to becoming the voice of EV technology. That's something that I'd love to hear about.
Well, to be really honest with you, that's a mantle that I'm not particularly comfortable in with. It really is born out of having a bit of recognition on LinkedIn, which I've been on for, 16 years. And I've shared a kind of ongoing EV narrative on that. And then a couple of years ago, I got recognized by LinkedIn as being what they call a top voice. Yeah. I suppose maybe it's a British trait. You're almost sort of a bit embarrassed about it, thinking, well, okay, well, thank you very much, move on. But I took it, and I took it partly because, it's good for the ego, there's no denying that. But in having something like that gives you a presence and a profile where you can then help bring stories to the fore and help try and, develop the narrative around the journey to electrification that brings in lots of different people, not just my view. I mean, I hope a lot of what I try to do, voice of EV, whatever, it's not my voice, it's everyone else's voice, but I'll help articulate it for them. So that's it.
And I suppose you're keeping your finger on the pulse of all of the activities that are going on in this world, aren't you?
Not quite. I've only got that many fingers, but...
that's the impression I get.
Well, I try to be holistic. I think it's important to try and look at the kind of complete journey. So, for example, with electrification, I think you've got to be thinking about mining and minerals and mineral processing, because that then comes up into batteries and battery factories. And then from battery factories, they're going to make electric vehicles. For whom, where, why, what materials, what markets... And then you've got to have a charging infrastructure. So between the mineral end and the electric vehicle charging end, I kind of make it my business to get to know people who specialize in those arenas. Yeah. I can't begin to understand half the complexity, but I get to know the gist, give them my platform, as it were, and then help join that kind of storyline up, that beginning to end, thing together.
And reading a little bit about you, doing my research, you haven't come from a conventional background into this at all, have you? My favourite line was, from electric guitars to electric cars. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Yeah,
okay. Well, I wanted to be a musician. I still do, but it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen.
It could.
No, when I sort of, in my late teens, I was in a band, in a Led Zeppelin tribute band, actually, when I was 16. Yeah, I used to try and be Robert Plant, but there was no chance of that. And we used to do all the Led Zepp covers and all that, so a few of our own songs. And then I got into music when I went to live in London, did it sort of professionally, did lots of gigs, support acts. I called myself Me, which was very confusing because... when I'd ring a venue to say, could I speak to the manager? And they said, well, who's ringing? I'd say, it's me. And they'd say, yeah, but who? Oh, that's my name, Me. It was a good idea at the time, but it had its challenges. So music by way of, that's what I started out doing, and that's what I loved doing. And then, like for a lot of us, you'll get responsibilities, get children, be married. Yeah. And you have to then maybe, you can't take so many risks. And being a musician is a risk. Anyone who's done it for a living for many, many years, I have huge admiration for, because probably a lot of the time they've not been earning much money and it's been a bit hand to mouth. But, that's their passion. That's what they believe in. But mine went from that passion for electric guitars, to now electric cars. Yes, it's I suppose, with a bit of a 30-year sandwich in between.
I love it. It's such a cool journey. So... Would you call yourself a car obsessive, or perhaps you're a technology obsessive?
I'm not sure if either of them are those in a way. Probably definitely not a car obsessive, because I can't ever in any way pretend to be, or I would hopefully wouldn't pretend to be, a car journalist. My forensic knowledge of the auto industry or motorsport, whatever, there is no forensic knowledge. It's just the people I know by association. I've sort of grafted on a lot of that stuff. I suppose I'm more a storyteller. I like the evolution of things. I guess having been a musician, I like how a song works, the structure of melody and rhythm and those things that all come together, where you see something like a beautiful song constructed from a number of different components. And when you look at life, or the change we're going through at the moment, tackling climate change, for example, how it's a bit like seeing a lovely song put together. There are component parts, and it's joyous to watch them or be part of them and maybe sort of tell that story. So I suppose I'm trying to be a bit of a musician, but by being a storyteller of the electric vehicle journey, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, yes, it does.
Okay, good.
And what sort of music kind of flavoured your life then?
Well, Led Zepp to begin with, definitely, but more pretty eclectic, really. When I was sort of quite young, sort of 12, 13, 14, I really liked classical music.
Right.
We had a good music teacher at school, and I liked, Planet, Sweet Beholst, all the obvious stuff, Handel's Water Music, that kind of thing. But then I got into Stravinsky and Mahler and a bit more sort of heavyweight sort of stuff. This is a
posh school then?
No, it wasn't. It was a secondary modern school. It wasn't far from posh. Posh was definitely not this school. But, the thing about music is it's classless. The great thing about music, in my view, whether it's classical music, pop music, house, blues, rap, really in many ways it should be at its core, at its heart, classless, because it's about humanity. It's about expression and all of those things. And that really shouldn't be anchored in anything to do with, wealth or poverty even. Although obviously a lot of blues music, for example, absolutely came from that kind of, poverty and challenge and stuff. So I suppose my journey is about storytelling and being as close to being a kind of musician as I can be in my own little way.
So I'm gonna pepper this with a few light-hearted questions. I've got here, as a kid then, were you a Lego kid or a Meccano kid?
Definitely Lego, although I didn't have Lego. My mum and dad didn't have the money for Lego. We had a cheaper version called Better Build.
Okay.
It looked like
I
Lego.
know that one.
Yeah, well, you obviously had Lego then. Your parents had more money than mine, I can tell. But no, it was like Lego, little bricks. You put them together, you could build houses and whatever. And then the other great thing, I don't know why this is always a pleasure. You'd build something, it would take you ages. You take great delight in knocking it down. But yeah, it was Lego.
I definitely got the Lego bug, and it's quite funny. I sort of noticed that Meccano kids went on to be engineers, and Lego kids went on to be designers. If you like, in its absolute sort of purest
form. That's intriguing, yeah.
Because we like the shapes and the colours and build things, but we haven't probably, maybe not quite got the discipline for the mechanical bit. I don't know what it is.
Did you have a chemistry set?
No, not at all.
I had a mate who had a chemistry set, and the only thing I remember him doing was making something that kind of blew up, which I thought, I fancy chemistry. That looks good.
It's exciting.
But yeah. No, I think I was more, I think, like a lot of young people, a bit faddish. You try something for a short period of time, you don't stick at it, and then you move on to something else.
That's very much me.
Yeah.
Or it was when I was a kid, that's for sure. Right, what else have I got? Okay, cars. First car.
I had a Volkswagen Beetle. It cost £5, and it lasted 2 weeks because I wasn't driving it. My friend Neil was driving it, and we had a bit of a incident in it.
£5. You've beaten me. I had a 200 quid 1967 Mini.
Wow,
so,
nice.
£5. I'm jealous.
Well, mind you, when did you get that? What year was that?
I was 17, so it was a long while ago.
Yeah, and mine would have been about 1976, I guess.
Yeah, mine would have been 70s, yeah.
Yeah.
But the 67 Mini, it'd be worth a fortune now. Mind you, an original Beetle back then.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, although mine was a bit of a weird colour. It was like a duck eggy sort of blue. Sounds nice, but it wasn't really. I think it'd been hand painted.
Okay, so there's some other ones. I've got dream car, or I've got a car you regret not buying. You could answer either of them or both of them. Dream car? Well,
I suppose because I've been exposed these last few years to some pretty amazing electric cars, I think, the Rimac Concept 1.
Yeah.
I think to have gone to the factory in Croatia and met these amazing people, Marty Rimac. But it isn't just Marty, it's a lot of amazing people. He's developed this culture, this family, if you like. Seeing that car and going for a ride out with Marte, which scared the living daylights out of me, but just, really brought home to me how magnificently exciting electric cars can be. Because I think for a lot of people, electric cars can be seen as a bit anodyne, a bit dull. They don't make a noise. There's no smell. It's a bit, what's it all about? But when you go in something like a concept, a concept 1 or a concept 2, I mean, you're in a proper car.
Yeah,
definitely.
First EV drive, you're right. It's quite a revelation.
What was your first EV drive then, given what you're doing? I mean, we're going to come on to what you're doing here, but what was your first EV experience?
It was a benchmark car that we had at the last place I worked. It was a Tesla, the little Tesla sports car.
Right,
the
Roadster.
The Roadster, yeah. And that was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
But, I mean, how many years ago was that?
That would have been probably about 2006.
Yeah.
2005,
it was over 10 years ago. Yeah, it was a long while ago.
Yeah.
It was the torque curve on it, the acceleration was phenomenal. I had a Lotus at the time, so it was quite a good kind of back-to-back test.
Similar.
Handling, not quite so good, because I was expecting it to handle like a Lotus and it didn't, but acceleration was amazing. But I was just completely obsessed with looking at the range. It had this variable readout saying I had 100 miles left, and I'd put my foot down and it'd go down to like 20 miles and I'd back off, and I remember that very vividly. But it was a good experience. It was so long ago now when you think about it.
Well, in relative terms, yes, but you look at the next 10 years hence, look at what's going to happen in that, So the last, where are we now, 13 years, but the next 10 years, it's exponential growth, isn't it? You know that with some of the stuff you're doing here. Absolutely,
yeah. Do you think about having specific cars to do different jobs, or are you more the sort of, no, I should focus on one kind of universal car that's like the solution to all my requirements?
That is a great question. And actually, one of the thoughts one of my real beliefs that I have is that we shouldn't see mass adoption of electric cars, because I think mass adoption of cars that are utilised for a minimal period of time of the day or night is not sustainable. It was. Many of these things that now people, talk about changing or being banned or whatever, they're not in and of themselves bad. But when you scale them up into 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 billion people on the planet using them, and a lot of urbanization and all of those things, when you put that all together, that then breaks their kind of proposition to a point where it's not sustainable. So to answer your question, I think owning a car is just all about compromise. And I think there's the problem. So if you need a car to carry a bunch of stuff, you get an estate car. Then when most of the time you're not carrying a bunch of stuff, you're driving around in a big estate car. You don't need it. And then sometimes if you just need a little car, so you buy a little city car to go around and about, when you then want to put a bunch of stuff in it, there's no room because it's a little car. So ownership, if you like, the ownership itself delivers compromise. And I think there's the rub. That's the thing that's at the core of where we need to shift and change. We do need vehicles to do specific things. So amazing cars like these around us, that is to do a specific job. It's going to be a very, low volume, high value proposition, but for a particular person who wants it to do a specific job, even if that job is being driven, just once or twice a week. If in the relatively small numbers, and it's not about elitism, it isn't about just pandering to the wealthy, it is about how the world has always worked around there are haves and there are have-nots, and there are all of these things, all this complexion of it all that goes on. But I do think this next decade we're going to see profound change in what ownership's about, what cars do. I'm a huge fan of the mass adoption of electric trucks, taxis, and vans. That's why your other company, Arrival, I love what they're doing. That's why I went and did what I did in 2007 with Modec. It's all well and good having, Tesla as the poster boy of EVs, and they've done a fantastic job, take nothing away from them. But it's kind of put too much of the focus on cars and not enough on commercial vehicles. Yeah,
not changing the kind of landscape of businesses and the way they operate. I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, I love the Arrival concept and Dennis's sort of super ambitious vision of having these vehicles and the micro factories and vans, buses, and so on, and lots of other exciting projects as well. And it's the kind of bread and butter of the whole group.
Well, if you do basically things the same as they've always done, you're going to get the same result. We all know that kind of cliched expression for that journey, but you have to revisit everything, and you have to try and not so much mimic nature in one sense, but in a way, yes, because nature's about not wasting things. Nature, as you'll understand in the work that you're doing now and in the past, is about an extraordinary focus on efficiency and avoiding waste. So if you have micro factories where you have smaller supply chains and you're able to reduce that bill of materials and that flow of parts and stuff absolutely. All around the world, build things locally for local use, even if the local is a continent, it's far better than shipping stuff all around the world, because we've seen during this pandemic the absolute nightmare scenario of getting back on track with the supply chains for the complex internal combustion engine vehicle, which has got thousands of parts, and you've got things being shipped all around the world, sometimes backwards and forwards. I don't really want to talk about the thing, well, I will say the word. I'm only going to say it once, Brexit. Brexit has illustrated how much stuff moves from Europe to the UK and back again several times.
Yeah.
And so whilst Brexit is going to be an extraordinary challenge to the auto industry, one that I think most people don't welcome, and it is what it is, but it's also showing how we have to change that process of how we procure parts and localize production and build, for where it's needed.
Sure.
And that's where I think, Arrival is definitely ahead of the curve on that. And I think other people are definitely going to be following this.
I do feel quite privileged, kind of looking behind me, looking to the right of me here, and it's a big part of the attraction for me coming here, and I know the rest of the team, in that we've kind of bookended the whole EV world, in that we've got these incredible performance vehicles with the robo race cars and DevBots and so on, and then we've got the utility vehicles that the Arrival guys are making. But then we're right in the middle of it with these crazy Mustangs, if you like. It kind of almost feels like we're this skunk works that's taken all of the best hardware and software that's being developed for these cars and for Arrival's vehicles, and we're reverse engineering it into something like this, which is super exciting.
Well, you say reverse engineering. I'm not an engineer, so in a sense that kind of, I sort of get the gist of what that means, but I bet you that's a lot more complex than it sounds. It's easy to just say reverse engineer, but what does that actually mean? Can you give us a little kind of...
I'm glad you asked, because I was going to talk about this later, but I genuinely, we are finding this more challenging doing this type of vehicle than a blank sheet of paper supercar ever is, because it's such a different challenge. You're taking something where ergonomics. You're taking an iconic design, which is great, which is why we're here. But something from an era where ergonomics were a nice to have, or they absolutely weren't a deliverable. Like visibility wasn't that important. The cars needed to look cool, and the cars were styled, but in the worst sense of the word styling. It wasn't a functional style, or it wasn't designed.
You mean the little vents on the door, for example, the side door?
Exactly. They didn't do anything.
They don't do anything.
No, they.
But what about the big? Is that an air intake for battery on the vehicle? Is that in any way cooling?
So we're cooling. We have radiators in there, so we're cooling stuff. Yeah.
Right.
So it's functioning. But we're taking things like what used to be the indicators down at the bottom. They're now going to be brake cooling, because we're still.
Nice.
So we're for the US, we're conforming to a legislation called replica law, where the car has to look like the original car within about 10%. They're still actually writing the legislation for that.
Wow, that's quite tricky. Within 10%, how does that work aesthetically?
Good
10%?
question.
Yeah.
It's a good question. It's a real challenge. So we need to make the car look as close as it possibly did to an original 67 Mustang. Not the Eleanor one behind us. The cars we're building are more like the Bullet cars.
Right.
The very original, not with the body kit or anything. Very, very clean original design of the Mustang. But yeah, to your point earlier, we're making some of the features on those cars that originally did nothing. We're actually turning them into something functional, and I love that we're able to do it. So the charger flap now is the side intake, It was just a dummy flap before, but now it opens and you put your charger in there, so it's doing something. Those what used to be indicators, we're still keeping the feature there, but we're ducting air through it and cooling brakes. And there's lots of other little features around the car that we're respecting the shape. Yeah. Because A, we want to, and B, we have to because of the replica law. But we're making them do something. So I like that. We're turning the car into something that's more functional than it was originally.
Yes. Well, I'd like to talk about something what I think for some people might be seen as like an elephant in the room, which is the electric vehicle story so far has been high-end, mainly. I mean, I've just mentioned Rimac. They're not inexpensive cars. Your work on this Mustang is not an inexpensive car. It's going to be a low-volume, high-value proposition.
Sure.
By elephant in the room, I mean, does this stuff really filter down into the ability for other manufacturers to make and refine and deliver electric vehicles, whether they're, well, I guess I know the answer to this, because working with Arrival and other things, you are cross-pollinating technologies between the two, aren't you?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I sort of answered my own question there, Mark.
Well, I suppose our intellectual property is we call it the skateboard, the EV rolling chassis. That's what the organisation's all about. From whether it's a van, a truck, a bus, an incredible race car, or a iconic classic car. They're all, the underpinnings are, to be honest, they're almost the same.
Yeah.
When I at my last place, when I said I was leaving and told the guys in the studio, and they said, "Where are you going?" And I told them, and they said, "What are you going there for?" And they didn't really know much about the company at all. And I showed them a photograph of this car nose to nose with the car behind me, and I still use that as the sort of benchmark image of like what we're all doing here, because when I told them like what's under the skin of that is under the skin of that, and they all went, "You're kidding." And no, it's the same technology. And that was like the wow kind of moment, and that's what did it for me. And and that's the best communicator of what we're doing here.
It's like a wolf in wolf's clothing, really, that, isn't it?
Well, it's something like that, and I kind of say, it's funny. It's always going to be really honest with you. It's always going to be polarizing when you're talking about a classic muscle car and you're electrifying it. It's not going to sit comfortably with everyone. But my favourite line at the moment is, "No internal combustion engine was harmed in the making of this car." And
I like that.
Sort of jokingly, but the reality is these are new cars. So we are absolutely not buying an old car. We did it once with this as a proof of concept. That's an old car, an original 60s car that we've stripped out, literally scraped the rust out, patched it up, made good. But it was purely as a one-off for a proof of concept to show that, you know what, we can engineer this and we can make it into an electric vehicle. So that did the job, and now we are redesigning it based on that original Mustang, and we're going to make 499 quality, repeatable. That's where the real skill set is coming into it now. But they're new cars.
It's an incredible skill set, and I actually think that it's breathing life, new life into a vehicle and taking it into the 21st century, not in a kind of marketing spiely sort of talk. It really is, because as we're going through this decade of immense change we now know, around the world, the end of the internal combustion engine, what that's going to mean for classic cars, I don't quite know. Certainly classic cars on the road. Sure. I mean, there's already a bit of a challenge in terms of running some vehicles, and some of them can only work at motorsport events, etc. I would like to say, you asked me earlier about what I do. One thing I'm really keen to do is not be seen as, or actually be a zealot for electrification. Electrification is, if you like, a managed transition. It's not anti-car. It's not about saying that anything internal combustion engine is bad and must go. It's about the pollution of internal combustion engines, predominantly in urban areas in proximity to people, where it's had an unintended consequence, quite a profound one. And so it's this, if you like, this blended transition, this managed transition over this decade, where people like you liberate, beautiful cars like the Mustang 67. It's hard to beat it when you don't know why you like the look of it, but you just do. It has something in a design cue that you don't need to be an engineer or a designer. You don't need any background.
You just know.
Instantly know. It's like the Mini. The Mini had a similar thing. Very few cars have that. that's a big part of it, isn't it?
I'm glad you've said that. I always bang on about like this emotional connection. For me, the cars should have a sense of occasion, and it's really important for me that you have an emotional connection with it. They're like an extension of your personality, and what I saw, it might be politically incorrect to say, but what I saw originally with electric vehicles is they're almost treated like an appliance, and it almost feels to some people that there's almost an anti-car mentality about them, whereas what we're doing here is, I feel, is the antithesis of that. We're making cars that you have got an emotional connection with them, at the hairs on your neck stand up, that we're going to choose iconic designs like this car and others. But I really want to, I want to get in, I want to see the car and get excited about it. I want to sit in it and touch it and feel it and get excited. And, park the car, walk away, but I can't help myself, turn back and look at it, because that's just the way I am.
Well, you know what though? I'll be frank, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the EV community, who the hell does that? But you're right in what you said, that there is an undercurrent within a lot of EV commentary, which is very negative, and it doesn't do itself any justice. It's not a helpful thing. We have to embrace this change. We have an extraordinary industry, certainly in the UK, of motorsport, astonishing talent of motorsport. We need to embrace that and help and enable that to go on the journey of electrification. And how we help the big factories, whether they're in the UK, Germany, France, elsewhere, make this transition in what is it? It's less than 10 years. It's 9 years. I looked it up the other day. I did a Google thing, Mark. I think it's 436 weeks.
That's scary.
It is, isn't it? Well, so you kind of think, if we just shout and bark at people, it's going to change, but it'll change badly. What we have to do is collaborate and find ways in which we take people. We all go on the journey together. We don't take people there. We all go on the journey collectively, and we bring things like iconic vehicles along with us. We find where the niches are, and yes, sometimes those niches are for wealthy people. There's no denying that, but that's not a bad thing. Aspiration is a good thing. I've aspired to, like I said earlier, Rimac. I aspire to climbing Mount Everest, but I'm never going to actually do it. But, I don't think people who are mountaineers are bad people just because they can afford to climb Mount Everest. Good on them. So I think it's this, grown-up conversation about this journey that we should all have. And I try to bring people like you and lots of other people I'm lucky enough to meet onto the pages of LinkedIn to help blend that kind of complexion of the story together.
I really, yes, it's an expensive car, undeniably. I do definitely see it though as it's the opposite to like a sea of bland kind of anonymous cars out there. And so a friend of mine works at Apple, who came over last year, and I was talking to him when I told him I was moving across.
Wasn't Johnny Ive, was it?
No, sadly not.
Okay.
But this guy's like fairly senior at Apple over in Silicon Valley. Lovely guy, and we were chatting away. We only meet up once or twice a year. And he said, what are you up to and where are you going? What are you going there for? And I started to tell him all about it. Is your mic okay?
Yeah, no, sorry. Oh, God. Yes.
Oh, we might need some help, guys.
Yeah.
So, talking to my friend at Apple, and he was saying, so who are these cars? Who are they aimed at? Who's going to buy them? I said, Michael, it's you. You're the prime candidate for buying one of these cars. Yeah. And the car park at his place, I said, I assume there's lots of Teslas there. Yeah, we all drive Teslas, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with Teslas at all, but it's like, why do you not...
Mix it up a bit, yeah.
Yeah, and exactly that. Mix it up a bit and show your personality, show that, you got something a bit different to the other guys. And, so I'm going to chase him up later on. Now we're here.
I think this is... You kind of raised an interesting point there about culture and about how businesses behave, and people can very easily kind of follow my leader a little bit. What you want, it seems to me, particularly in smaller companies, well, in any company really, is lots of individuals that find a way somehow of working collectively together. so that you don't just get committees, you don't just get blobs.
Yes.
You get that thing where you get character, personality, challenge. When we were walking around earlier, you said to me about you encourage people here to question things or to try things out. And okay, there's always a parameter, there's always limits to everything, but what sort of people do you work here? I mean, you've come here, you're a bit like me, you're an older guy. So I've noticed quite a few young people around here, a nice range of people. How is the company developing in that fashion? And anyone watching this, why would they want to come and work here? I mean, I know I would want to come and work here, but you won't have me. I'm too old, But
that's not true.
Yeah, but give me an idea of what is it like to work here at Charge.
It's interesting as well. I'd probably say, in my perhaps politically incorrect way, we're going through quite a culture change here. Not a culture change, but a change in the type of disciplines we're getting on board now. And I think I'm right to say Arrival are probably doing the same thing. Both companies were in the very, very much proof of concept and very early prototype stage. So they've got a lot of super smart people, like tiny little skeleton teams, little family units that I like working in. I'm really used to working in. The design studio at my last place was very, very much like that. Even as the organisation got bigger, you can kind of protect yourself in a small family unit. But I think both Arrival and Charge have got very, very bright, super smart people that are coming up with great ideas and concepts and so on. But I'm oversimplifying it, but what I see now is both companies need people now that can take those great ideas and start to productionize them, for want of a better expression,
right.
Turn them into something that you can maximize the quality and you can make it repeatable and you can go into production with. It's kind of as simple as that. So it's slightly different. You build one-offs and you make great strides very, very quickly with a tiny little team of people. But now you need to start scaling up, and you need more specific disciplines, and you need more people on board, basically, and you need a different mindset as well. You're not thinking about sort of hand to hand, sort of just delivering one thing. You're thinking about in 6 months' time, in 9 months' time, in 12 months' time, what you're going to be doing. Budgets starts to get a lot more serious. Not that it wasn't serious at all before. And everyone's budget conscious, but the bigger money, obviously, as you head towards production, starts to step up on a sort of more of an exponential curve, I suppose.
Yeah, sure.
And so that's the sort of thing. It's now getting, now we've got a guy that's looking after production. So he's a one-man band at the moment. He's going to need more people very soon. We're expanding, like the electrical team, the technicians. We need more technicians and so on. The design team, I joined in February, and very, very quickly we've got designers, we've got colour and materials specialists, we've got UX, UI, and then you have CAS, like A-surface sculptors and so on. We won't be doing clay modelling here, certainly not for the foreseeable future. Yeah. Everything we do is digital, but you need all of those specialists on board. And I think as well, one last thing on that, I would say, it doesn't suit everyone as well, because if you come from a big organisation, it might be too much of a culture shock coming to a place like this, but if you thrive on that sort of agility and the fast moving and the lateral thinking and an element of sort of perhaps covering a few disciplines, do you know what I mean, and a few deliverables. I love that.
Hasn't this year shown everybody that being able to adapt to things that are challenging is possible? Do you not
Absolutely.
think okay, and we are a little bit older than maybe a lot of the people we see around here.
Sadly, yes.
Yeah, well, no, but I'm astonished at how well people have coped with this change. And I know that's easy to say because it has a consequence in terms of, mental health for a lot of people, financial challenge that it's given a lot of people, a lot of very bad things. However, the overall thing I find quite extraordinary all around the world is that the world has carried on spinning round, humanity has carried on, doing its thing, and we've adapted to this change, and it's been an extraordinary change. So I think more people are probably capable of that than they realise themselves. Maybe they've seen that this year. So I think coming to a company like Charge, where you might imagine or I'm not sure if I could do that. Or what if they asked me to do something I don't know? Perhaps in the past, you could have understood them thinking that. But now I'd say to anybody, you know, come here and do it, because you've already shown, a lot of people have shown you can adapt, you know, and this is a time to do it. The journey that you're on isn't just about making these beautiful machines. You know, of course, that's the core job, but it's about accelerating the capabilities in and around electrification, in and around autonomy, in and around things that are now rapidly reshaping the whole mobility landscape. Yeah. And I can't think of a more exciting place to be than within that world.
I love that. No, you're absolutely right, and I think as well with this place is we've got Formula One people, we've got like supercar people, sports cars, military vehicles. There's a real melting pot of those skills all coming together, and I kind of think of it that, you know, we're all used to the processes from the last place we worked, and it's cherry picking the good bits, you know, and you can't just throw stuff away, but because there are certain necessary evils, if you like, that you have to deal with. But you can certainly optimize it and fine tune it, and like I say, and cherry pick it, and that's what we're in the process of doing at the moment. We haven't, you know, we're not quite there yet. I can't say it's perfection, but that process is getting better and better, and we're kind of streamlining it, and it's working. It is really working.
Can I ask you a couple of questions then about kind of the immediate term and the future? So you're going to put together 499 people are going to be lucky enough to buy this extraordinary electric Mustang. What happens after that? I mean, you've got to do that job first, I know, but what comes next? What is the future vision for the company then?
So I can't answer all of it, but I can answer some of it. I'd love to answer all of it to you. We're working on that at the moment.
Okay.
So we've had 1 or 2 brainstorm meetings, and amongst the designers, amongst the sort of senior management team, and we're putting together a document. So obviously, it would be no surprise, we are targeting the right sort of vehicles, and going back to the EV skateboard, you know, the rolling chassis that we have as the underpinnings. The beauty with that is, I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, but you can shorten it, lengthen it, make it wider, make it narrower. You can kind of modify it to suit. So it's possible to do a similar thing. You know, we can target other vehicles, classics that are out there. I mean, it might be like with the Mustang, that's still the steel shell from the original Ford tools, and the 67 tools, which gives us our own challenges, but we have optimized that as much as everything, you know, and everything you inherit from those old tools. But we've fixed things, and we're optimizing it and improving things, and then we're attaching our own composite body panels to it. So all of that's done at arrival as well. So we're resurfacing large areas of the car. So the fenders and the hood and the trunk and so on, and doors, they're all going to be in composites, because we need to save as much weight as we can. Because fundamentally, the car, a full steel car with batteries and everything, turns into quite a heavy vehicle.
Yeah, indeed.
So we're throwing away some large amounts of kilos to optimize the weight.
Yes.
As you know, you make the car the lightest weight possible, and you kind of get everything else for free. You get the economy, the range, the handling, the performance, dynamics, and all that sort of stuff. You know, that's a sports car. It's a Colin Chapman thing.
Yeah.
And that's stayed with me for, you know, my whole career. So that applies to these cars as well. So we'll do the same principle. We'll target Project 2, Project 3, Project 4. We'll very carefully choose what specific kind of iconic car we want to target, and we'll apply the same logic. You know, the real, I suppose, at a high level, the real investment is in getting it right for this car, and then it's nothing like as simple as just modifying it, but essentially, you know, we will take that chassis and kind of morph it to suit the next vehicle. If it's a smaller footprint or a larger footprint, just in the same way Arrival are doing with a small truck, a medium, like 7.5 ton truck, or a bus. You know, it's the same logic.
That stuff's so interesting. And you know what? As you were talking, I just had this car over my shoulder. You mentioned Colin Chapman, and then you've got Robo Race next to you. I think what's lovely about your inclusion in this business, and all these other younger people, as we mentioned earlier, is that you can have those 2 frames of reference. You know, one of the icons of the internal combustion engine and development in motorsport, right through to, you know, high-tech digital capability and autonomy and all of that. And I think this is I think the lovely message of what you're all doing here, that you are embracing the traditional side of the automotive industry.
Absolutely, yeah.
With the vision of the high-tech future.
Yeah.
You know, it's not binning one of them, it's amalgamating them. And I really like that. So on that note, can I ask you this question? It's just a thought in my mind. I know you don't gut these cars. You get the body shells and then you build them from there. But given, let's say it's 2030. Let's say we're still here, fortunately. Yeah. We'll look a little bit, you know,
we'll be
whatever.
getting on a bit.
We'll be getting on a bit. But but we'll have 1 billion vehicles on the planet still that have an internal combustion engine.
Yeah.
Typically over 10, maybe 15, perhaps even 20 years, those billion internal combustion engines will still be internal combustion engines till 2050. So is there anything that you could envisage you've learned over these last few years where we could have a program of converting a lot of that stock into electrification? Not in the same way, not the same thing, but is there going to be a way in which we can play catch up with trying to remove the internal combustion engine stock once we get to the end game at the end of this decade?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that one, because I could see both CEOs of the business looking down on me. Of course, you could do that. You could take them. You could take cars and you can retrofit the powertrain to them.
Yeah, but can you do it economically? That's the thing. Can you do it economically? Technically, you can do it, yes. I mean, it's a given, isn't it?
The thing is, I don't think you can. It's been interesting because over the last few months, we've visited a few places that are doing it now. It's slightly different. I'm not really answering your question at the moment, but there are companies out there now that are taking cars, classic cars,
yes,
and they're putting crashed Tesla units into them, powertrains into them, or they're finding their own units and doing that. It's a different commercial proposition altogether, but it's not the way we want to operate. We want to engineer something, you know. But
could you envisage someone industrialising it, commercialising it?
I suppose you could, yeah. And who knows? We might even be doing it. You know, there might be a requirement.
I could imagine you'd got learned capabilities over these years coming up that would potentially allow you to have stuff that either you license to people or whatever that gives value to the business. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm just thinking in my first thoughts are, and I'm thinking of it today, is that it's just the unknown. If someone gives you a car and says, if I'm sort of interpreting your question correctly, if someone gives you a car that you need to throw away the internal combustion engine and put electric motors into it, you just don't know what you're getting with that car. You're not getting 499 of those cars that are all consistent.
Yeah.
One might be rotten here, one might have an issue here, one might, you know what I mean? So there's not a straightforward formula you can apply to it to have a production line running with them all. That's not to say you can't work around that, but it's a really good question. It's doable, for sure. It's doable, but you one car might be in such a good shape that you might be able to turn it around, say, in a week. But the next one that comes along, it might need so much retrofitting and welding and patching, or if it's composite, it might need new panels or whatever. But it might take twice as long.
I'm with you, and I mean it is a monumental challenge because the very last thing you want to do is just be stripping out a load of engines and binning them, because that's not environmental. Yeah. That's not circular economics. Yeah. That's not anything that you could argue is progress. So, I mean, the honest answer, I asked the question because I don't know, but I'm just sort of thinking, December 31st, 2029, the last internal combustion engine car rolls off the thing. It's going to be there for 10 or 20 years.
Yeah.
I suppose in a way that's part of the logic of bringing this stuff forward, because there's going to be the lag time with the ones that have been built. But given we're getting towards agreement on Euro 7 compliance, so we're going to be somewhere near, 50 kilograms kilometre, isn't it? We're going to get pretty efficient in terms of a brand new, bench-tested internal combustion engine car. I think everybody knows that one of the problems with some of these efficiencies that are either in modern diesels or whatever, and they're there, let's acknowledge them, is over time, if the vehicle isn't maintained and serviced to the right level, that diminishes sometimes quite considerably. And then the pollutants are kind of really not what they could and should be. But yeah, it's certainly, I mean, what an extraordinary 10 years hence this is going to be.
Well,
it's not going to be like the last 10, is it?
I know, waking up Saturday morning and hearing that government message basically that 2030 then, no more diesel or petrol engines, and 2035 no more hybrid engines.
It doesn't seem real almost, does it?
It's just round the corner, isn't it? It really is.
I think for younger people, that they will have a sense of, we're fine. That's kind of what happens. It's like, no one uses an iPhone 4 anymore. It's the software doesn't work on it anymore. It's not as simplistic as that, but they accept there are iterations and there are changes where you migrate from one operating system to another. So we're migrating from the internal combustion engine operating system to the electrification OS, and that's all it is. My view, as I've mentioned a couple of times, probably too much, forgive me if I have, is that, the bigger revolution to come is not electrification. It's actually the whole thing of what a car does, who owns it and what they do with it in 24 hours.
Yeah. And that then starts to lead me into where are you with the autonomous technology? What's your sort of, your feelings on that? Your kind of...
What do I think where it is in terms of fulfillment, you mean?
Or where... Is that the beginning of the end, or for cars that you drive, in terms of enjoyment, all the things that I've been talking about, the connection and the emotion and whatever? Does that mean that at a certain point in time we just say goodbye to all of that and just get over ourselves, and they just become an appliance at that point, and you get in it and it takes you shopping, or it picks your shopping up and brings it to you, or whatever? It's such a different mindset.
Can I answer it in this way? I think if you look at the consequence of maintaining that is the continual issue either with emissions or catastrophic climate change, which means nothing exists. We're not here anymore. What does it matter what anyone thinks? And okay, that sounds like an extreme view, but if I answer your question against that as a scenario and say to you that yes, a lot of people hate me for saying this. Yeah, that is the world we're going to have. We're going to have an anodyne, robotic world of you get in and you're just taken somewhere and there's no pleasure in it whatsoever. And compared and contrasted to what we've got today and have had for many years, that is sad. And that feels like a step backwards. And of course, in many emotional terms, it absolutely is. But like I say, match it against the consequence of not doing it. However, this is what I honestly, genuinely believe in. That maybe you and I as granddads and maybe younger people with their sons, etc., in 10, 20, 30 years' time will go to lots of motorsport events, track events. There will be cars making a noise with a combustion engine in, with a steering wheel in, with a person driving it in. And your grandsons and granddaughters and mine likewise will be saying, what are they doing? They're driving it, but why?
So you've pulled me out of my slight depression now. Yeah, I think you're right. I'm thinking exactly the same thing, in that you need to go out and buy a circuit now then, don't you? Because that's where the niche market is going to be.
I think, Mark, in the future, and by that I mean 5-10 years and then all the future, motorsport is going to be huge. I think track days, going to motorsport meets, going to classic car meetups, all those things are going to be the absolute antidote to that robotic anodyne clinical world of I sit in it and nothing happens except I go from A to B. I genuinely believe that, and maybe that's just like a kind of idealistic sense, and some people say, no, you're just tricking us to accept the boring bit and then you won't give us the other bit. I don't think so. And I can see cars like this, with the people that have bought them going to Silverstone and having an amazing, race with all of a bunch of these against other combustion engines. It'd be amazing. Be fantastic. I love the Silverstone Classic Car Show. Yeah. Even though I say the things I say about EV and all of that stuff, it's my favourite meetup of any car thing in the world. I'd rather go to that than the next Tesla electric vehicle launch, honestly. And again, people hate me for saying that, but I would. It's more a better day out. It'll work on time. You won't have to wait 3 hours for it to start, for one thing. It'll be much better.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I've seen already with some of our customers in that car's going to have all of the technology in it. It will be future-proofed, and ultimately at some point in time you will be able to drive it around autonomously, or use the expression, it will drive you around autonomously. Yeah. But you can see, talking to some of the customers and the conversations we have here, is that there's a large element of people that want to drive the car and to have it as a driver's car still.
Definitely.
And yes, the technology is great. You know, it's useful to be able to make phone calls and to have information and to, you know, and to be connected. But there's times where you just want to drive it, you know, and sometimes it's nice to have it there, but you don't want to be using it. It's not necessarily an office on four wheels. Although some people, some of the real business guys might want to do that. They still want to show they've got a personality, so they want a car like that. But actually, they want to use it like an office, you know, like almost. You know, I've heard the expression here before, like a technology showcase on wheels. And initially, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit.
Yeah.
But it will be that, but it just happens to be a very cool, iconic version of that. You know that.
But I think this whole thing of, you know, the car I like at the moment, so that's the thing I choose to drive, is the I-Pace, because I think that blends tradition in terms of its look and feel, the mechanical engineering of it, apart from anything else. With modern technology, you know, with battery, motor, inverter, power electronics, all the rest of it, and that's fine. So I think it's going on this sort of journey, but accepting that the world is always changing. You know, this is what it is. We can't, you know, we try and keep some of these things. We still have racehorses. People still have, you know, horses and all that sort of thing. We didn't shoot them all. But actually, the reason why we moved on from having horseless carriages and horses everywhere was pollution. You know, there were so many tens of thousands of horses in cities around the world, and you know what comes out the back of horses? Well, you know, that was everywhere, and it was a massive pollution problem.
Now we're there again.
More people that came, more horses that came. It was you couldn't carry on. So we just jumped to the next iteration of a load of pollution coming out the back of them, and we're going to move on from that. But, you know, here's the thing. Haven't we all got used to being almost, you know, cyborgs, partial cyborgs already? You know, our lives are connected in these things.
Yeah.
A lot of that's bad, but a lot of it's good.
Yeah.
A lot of it enables us to keep in touch with people we love more regularly. You know, whether you're FaceTiming your mum that you otherwise wouldn't be able to see, certainly this year, things like that. The ability to be efficient in journeys. I mean, one of my favourite apps is City Mapper, where you can plan and schedule and put together a journey across a city, you know, London or any place you go to you don't know. Really easy with these. So we've already accepted that technology is changing us, you know, with the mobile phones over the last 10 years.
And this year has been the kind of only positive to come out of the awful COVID situation was, you know, I joined February, so I spent a couple of months meeting the team, you know, starting to get people on board and getting engaged, really. And then it all went pear-shaped for us.
Yes.
So, but the technology's been there for working remotely and so on for a few years now, but nobody's really gotten their heads around it. And also the stigma of, like, I remember conversations over the last few years where people are wanting to work from home, and it was like, oh yeah, you know, oh, I'm working from home tomorrow. Oh yeah, I know what you're up to. And it's like,
working from
I really
home,
am
stroke the garden, stroke the kids.
I really want to be working from home. So we've all clearly been forced into it this year, and it works. You know,
Well, it does, because I've talked to quite a few people who've got either small or big businesses, and what they've said this year is, it's not all good, but this is the good stuff. People are being measured on output, what they do, not their attendance. If you can produce the output for your company in an hour, good luck to you then. If you want to go swimming in the morning and take the dog walk in the afternoon and go out with the kids in the evening, fine, fill your boots. You know, the job is delivery, the job is production, the job is, you know, efficiency. So I think in some ways you're right. It's kind of, it's rebooted a bit of that. I mean, from my own perspective, I wouldn't be talking to you now if we didn't have LinkedIn and the ability to connect to people all over the world.
Yeah.
I strive to talk to people on WhatsApp or on FaceTime or whatever. Not every single person I connect with, but from time to time people that I can for mutual reasons.
Sure.
And so to make it more human. So it's not just a digital relationship.
Yeah.
But there are people I've known who I know really well, who I would definitely call a friend. I've never met them. But, you know, we interact a lot on LinkedIn. That's not a bad thing, you know, because actually it's given me a much more cosmopolitan network of friends and associates in stuff. And I wouldn't be doing probably not even 3/4 of what I do, I wouldn't be doing if it wasn't for that.
Sure.
So I think the journey likewise into electrification, autonomous and all of that, it's not a binary thing. It's not a complete thing. It's going to be a blend of stuff.
Sure. No,
Anyway,
it has been. That's one of the small positives that's come out of all this. It's firmly established how we can perfectly operate as a business. Everybody working remotely from home. We had a small skeleton team building physical prototypes during lockdown 1, but the rest of us were in the digital world because that's where we were with the car. Everything was being surfaced and packaged and designed. It was all electronic, so actually, timing wasn't bad at all for us. But, now
it was lovely to get back together again, wasn't it?
Oh my goodness!
And go to the pub. Oh, that first visit back to the pub, I nearly cried. I took the dog in. A pint. Oh, can I have a pint, please, Neil? And you sit down in your favourite little bit of the pub, and you kind of think, oh, it's the little things.
Absolutely, we really miss all of that, and now we're kind of a 50-50 stage now. Some of us are in the office, some of us are working from home still. So it's not as extreme as it was first time round for us, but everyone's doing all the right things. But the remote thing's working really well. Ironically, the thing that frustrated me is that at the last place, I was really into the virtual reality and the augmented reality, mixed reality side of things, and we've made massive strides in sort of pretty much pioneering that in our industry. And it was something that particularly appealed to me. And when I joined here, I hadn't had the opportunity to really engage with it here and get stuck in. We are now, we're ramping up quite quickly with it now. But that would have been perfect to have had that set up at home, so we could have then be, you could have been in your living room, I could have been in mine, but we could have had a virtual one of these next to us, and we could have then be walking around it and analysing stuff and talking about the package underneath and so on. And that works, that's all doable.
I've seen that with NVIDIA. I went to a thing with Jensen Huang, and up on the stage he shows that they were, I'm not sure if it was McLaren or something or another. Anyway, they were going through the whole thing, and they had, one team in America, one team, it's exactly like you say. And you kind of think, this is okay as long as this isn't the only thing that happens, because there's that wonderful thing called happenstance that happens in life, certainly in business, which is something that Steve Jobs was a believer in. You need to have an environment where you bring different people together, so in a chance encounter, chance conversation, someone says, oh, we were doing this, and they say, we were doing that. That would work together, wouldn't it? And then voila, something magical happens.
I love it.
That you can't kind of scope as such. It's happenstance. It's almost like, well, have I mentioned the Rubik's Cube just before we sort of finish things?
I was going to ask you, what on earth is that doing on the desk?
Okay, well, do you know, the best thing would be if I could now
demonstrate
that I can do it in like a minute 30.
That would be impressive.
I know, I should have practiced during lockdown, because I have a friend who's teaching me how to do it. There is a technique. You
can do it 100 times. We can just edit this out.
Oh, yes, look,
have you do
there
it
you
once.
are. Look, and there you are, I did it. No, I'm not going to cheat. But this is my little metaphor I'd like to leave you with. There are apparently, this is extraordinary, 42 trillion permutations of the Rubik's Cube, of the different colours on the different sides. Yeah, it's bizarre. It's a vast number.
I can't even get my head around those numbers.
I know. However, there's one permutation where all the colours match up. Now, you say to yourself, well, I'm never going. You're not going to randomly do it, or it's just not going to happen. You could. It might take you years. But the people that learn the technique, that can do it in a minute 30 or less than a minute, you see certain gifted kids that can do it in seconds, says to me that this complexity of the world we're in now, with the challenges of climate change, the challenges of mobility, the challenges of economics, food, politics, social unrest, all these massively different things, all of these different squares, let's call them that, all these facets, to click them all round into place so they all match up, it's all about knowing that technique. So I think collectively as humanity, once we all teach each other, well, what is the technique? What is the bit where you keep the thing in the centre square and revolve around it so you eventually match it up quite quickly?
Yeah.
What is that? And if we can do that in working collaboratively between companies, between countries, between continents, etc. And I think we've got more chance of that with the way the internet brings people together than we've ever had before. And so I kind of use the Rubik's Cube as a way of what we can do if we put our mind to it and know the technique. And I don't know the technique yet, Mark.
Someone taught me that when I was about 12 or
Have a
13.
go.
No, I
Go
can't.
on,
There's
have a
no
go.
way. When I was about 12 or 13, somebody taught me that technique. I am not that gifted kid, but they taught me how to do it. And I could I don't know how long, it was like 5 minutes or something, but it was just get that side right, rotate it, get that side right. And we could do it. And it was like astounding. To my parents, it was like, how can our boy do that?
Yeah. Well, this is rubbish telly where you say about doing something and then you don't actually do it. But I hope the point, you get my gist.
Yeah, absolutely. I do, yeah.
So let's put it this way. The next time we talk, I will be able to do the Rubik's Cube. Will you?
I'll have to, yes, I'll have to do some research. I think we're out of time, but there's so many other things that we were going to talk about, so we need to get you back. This has been great fun.
Well, thank you. Like I said, it's a privilege to come into this sort of arena with this sort of technology. And honestly, I know who you are and your background and what high regard you're held in.
Bless
so
you,
to
that's very kind.
be able to enjoy a conversation with you like this is just something else. So I'd love to just point elbows at you.
The feeling's
say,
very
thank you
mutual.
so much, and I'd love to come back sometime.
It would be brilliant.
Without doubt.
You're always welcome. Well, what we should do is when we get one of the next prototypes in a good state of build, we'll get you over and we'll have another catch up and we'll show you. We'll take you out for a drive.
Oh, that's what I was hoping you were going to say. Take you out for a drive.
We should do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
And that kind of will then start to put it all into perspective. First time I drove one of these was awesome. You get in it thinking it's an old classic Ford, but then when you turn in and then when you put your foot down and whatever, you realise it's like a supercar under the skin.
Oh man!
So really look forward to seeing you again. So thank you so much for coming along today.